She marched up my porch with a stack of papers and yelled, "Pack your things, you're done here," like she owned the road, the trees, the sky, everything. I didn't even live in her neighborhood, but she pointed at her HOA badge like it was some royal crown. My daughter froze behind me as Karen waved that lawsuit in my face, claiming I was violating HOA rules by existing next to her property. I told her calmly this was my land, paid by my father's last savings, but she snapped, "You'll lose this house in court and I'll enjoy watching it burn down financially." The way she smiled when she said it, like she already won. She didn't know the judge had personally sworn me into a courtroom years ago. And she didn't know who handed me my first law book. She thought I was an easy target, but I looked at her papers once, and I knew she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. I showed up to court alone in work boots and a worn jacket while Karen arrived with 2 HOA board members and a camera crew from her street gossip group. She whispered loudly, "He's going to cry when the judge kicks him out," and they all laughed like it was already settled. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but because I kept thinking how far she was willing to go just to crush a stranger. When the judge called her name first, she jumped up and poured lies like she practiced them all night, saying I violated HOA building codes, refused their inspections, and threatened their community values. The courtroom watched her like she was some hero saving the neighborhood. She kept throwing around big words, acting like she knew law, but then she made the mistake of saying, "Your Honor, we approve every house within a mile radius." Her voice echoed, "A mile radius." I looked up slowly. Because right there, in that moment, she proved she didn't even know where their authority ended. My daughter sat behind me, and I promised myself she would see something today she'd never forget. When the judge finally turned his eyes toward me, the room expected me to beg. Karen leaned back with that victory grin like she was tasting the win already. I stood up slowly, placed a single folder on the desk, and said only one line, "Your Honor, I don't fall under their jurisdiction." The HOA board burst out laughing, but the judge raised his hand for silence. I opened my folder and slid forward the official county map, the exact one I had helped draft years ago. Karen's smile froze as the judge traced the red boundary line with his finger, stopping just short of my property. "Your house," he said calmly, "is not within the HOA. Her face turned pale, but I didn't stop. I added the signed deed from the county office, the property tax statements, the building permits, every document she never thought I had. The room fell silent. Karen tried to interrupt, but her voice cracked because she finally realized. She sued someone who knew the law far better than she ever imagined. Karen tried to laugh it off like everything was just a misunderstanding, but her voice shook and her eyes darted around the courtroom. She whispered to her board members, asking why they didn't warn her, why no one told her I had connections, why this letter even existed. I stayed silent. I wanted her to feel every second of uncertainty she had put my family through. The judge called the bailiff to bring forward the county report, and as he read through it, the room grew colder. It detailed every complaint Karen had filed against non-HOA residents, every fake violation notice, every intimidation attempt. One line hit her like a punch, pattern of targeted harassment. She tried to deny it, but the judge kept reading. I noticed my daughter gripping the edge of the bench, not from fear anymore, but from relief. Karen's voice began to crack, begging the judge to give her time to let her fix things quietly, but he shook his head. He asked me if I wished to say anything. I looked at the floor for a moment, then said softly, "She made me feel unsafe in my own home." It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, but it was the truth, and it shattered whatever defense she had left. The judge leaned back, thinking carefully, and Karen's breathing grew louder, faster. He began with the words she never expected. "This case is dismissed immediately." Karen gasped, but before she could speak, he added, "Mr. Walker has full right to pursue damages." She looked like the room tilted under her feet. The judge ordered her to stand, and when she did, he told her that impersonating legal authority, filing fraudulent complaints, and falsifying jurisdiction lines could lead to criminal charges. The bailiff stepped closer just in case, but she was frozen. My daughter let out a breath she had been holding for weeks. Karen tried to claim she was only protecting her neighborhood, but the judge cut her off. "Justice doesn't need defending from people like him," he said, pointing at me. "It needs defending from people like you." She finally broke, tears running down, while everyone watched the fall of the woman who swore she could ruin me with a lawsuit. And still, she had no idea the real twist was coming next. Outside the courthouse, Karen rushed after me, desperate, trying to convince me to settle quietly. She promised to stay out of my way, promised to stop the harassment, promised to never involve the HOA again. Her voice kept shaking like she could still save herself. I let her talk because every word showed how scared she truly was now. My daughter stood beside me, holding my hand tight, watching the woman who once threatened our home crumble like dust. Karen demanded we forget everything and move on, but I looked her in the eyes and said, "You tried to take what little we had left." She tried to force a smile and said, "We can fix this, we can fix everything." But I pulled out a second envelope, the one I hadn't shown in court. I handed it to her, and when she opened it, her knees almost gave out. It was the notice that I had filed a formal counterclaim seeking compensation for emotional distress, property interference, and legal fees. This time, she wasn't the one holding the power. I was. Her face went blank as she read each line, her fingers trembling like she was holding fire. She tried one last plea, saying the HOA would never allow her to lose this fight. But I finally told her what she should have known from day one. I was a county legal clerk for 8 years. She stared at me stunned, all her fake confidence dying in seconds. The camera crew that came with her earlier now filmed every moment, but this time it wasn't for her victory post. This was the downfall of the woman who believed she controlled everyone around her. She backed away slowly, realizing this wasn't just a loss, it was public humiliation. The board members disappeared like nothing ever happened, leaving her alone on the courthouse steps. My daughter leaned her head against my arm, silent, safe. And as we walked away, Karen sank to the ground, clutching the papers that once promised her power but now marked the beginning of her own ruin. That night when we finally reached home, the porch light felt warmer than ever. My daughter sat with me on the steps, watching the wind move through the trees like the land itself was breathing again. She asked if things were really over, if Karen could still take our house. I told her quietly, this land is ours and no one can take that from us. For the first time in weeks, she smiled without fear. I thought about my father, about how he worked every job he could so I could own this little piece of earth. I thought about every sacrifice made to protect it. Karen wanted to break us, but instead she reminded me what we were fighting for: family, home, peace, freedom. As the night settled, I closed my eyes and whispered, no one decides our future but us. And somehow that felt like the truest victory of all. Weeks later, I walked into the county office to pick up the final paperwork, and the clerk shook my hand like I'd won something bigger than a case. On the way out, I passed the community board, and there it was, a public notice declaring that Karen had been removed from her HOA position for misconduct. The same woman who once tried to drag me through court now couldn't even sign a parking permit. As I stepped outside, the sun hit the fields across my land, and something inside me settled. I didn't need revenge anymore. I already had everything she tried to take. My daughter ran ahead of me toward the truck, laughing again, alive again, and I realized all the fear, the threats, the lies led to this moment of peace. I looked back at the courthouse across the square and whispered, almost to myself, no one protects this home but me. And in that quiet, steady moment, it felt like the land agreed.